going on YouTube? This is Jim back with another video, here to give you guys my review of Call of Duty Infinite Warfare. Now, Call of Duty is a game that comes out every year, and I don't always play them when they launch. This one, as a matter of fact, is 2 years old. We've had Call of Duty World War II, and we've got a new Call of Duty coming out later in 2019. So this is a little bit older, but it was new to me, and I do enjoy the campaigns. I don't dive into the multiplayer too much. I'm more of a Battlefield guy. But that said, I do enjoy a good campaign, and I have to say that this was a really good campaign. Now, as with all my reviews, I don't give a score anymore. I just tell you guys my thoughts and opinions. And the first part of this video will be spoiler-free, so rest assured if you're like me and you take a little bit longer to get through your backlog, I'm not going to spoil anything, but I will tell you guys that I will spoil stuff later on, but I'll give you guys plenty of warning before I do that. Now, Call of Duty Infinite Warfare has a very stereotypical beginning to a Call of Duty game. You are playing as Soldier X, the perfect soldier who can be dropped into any situation, destroy legions of enemies, take infinite amount of damage, and always fight your way to the end. And this game starts off just like all those other Call of Duty games. And just like most other Call of Duty games, you're facing against a celebrity mocap big bad villain. This time it's none other than our beloved Jon Snow, aka Kit Harington, who plays as a villain of an evil faction of humans who broke away from Earth, now calls Mars home. And they have decided that it's time to go back and purge the Earth of humanity, and long live the Martians, right? That's really the kind of beginning of the plot, and that's very stereotypical Call of Duty, where you're going up against a big bad for no other reason than you have to do it. And very early on in the game, things go horribly wrong for the Earth armies, and you are one of 2 remaining ships that are drifting in space. Earth is defenseless. The big bad clearly has won. He thinks that you guys are defenseless and weak, but you have a secret weapon, and that is Lieutenant, and ultimately promoted to Commander Nick Reyes, who is the captain of the UN, I don't know if they're UNSC, I don't know what they were called, UNF, I think. Doesn't matter. It's called the Retribution is the name of the ship. And you are sent on a quest of revenge / retribution, you like that, to get even with the evil Salem Koch, aka Kit Harington, to destroy him and his fleet. Now, you have really not a lot of options in your firepower because you're just a single ship. And what I love about this game is it very quickly diverts from the standard Call of Duty mission structure, and it lets you pick the missions you want to do. There are story missions, there are optional side missions that give you better arsenal and give you a little bit more lore of the world, help you explain why things are the way they are. And think of it as guerrilla warfare. You know, you're doing small strategic strikes on different planets, and the game rewards you by giving you more upgrades and more guns, making it easier for you to progress in other missions. But it also, in a sense, kind of weakens the enemy because you're blowing up supply depots and you're taking out high-value targets and vice admirals and such. As a matter of fact, this game has a murder board, essentially, of the who's who of the evil Martian Empire, and you can basically see where all of these lieutenants and corporals and captains and admirals are, and slowly whittle them down guerrilla warfare style. And I love that. And it was such a cool concept in a Call of Duty game, because Call of Duty games have always been extremely linear in their gameplay, very narrow focused on, you know, just corridor shooting and, you know, using the gadget of the level, whether it's some kind of SAM strike or some kind of hacking drone or something, to slowly progress through. But when you add in that layer structure of various missions and you allow the character, you know, you start to really become Nick Reyes through this, to kind of choose their own destiny, it kind of has a a good vibe to it, and I like that. It's typical Call of Duty, though, at the end of the day. A lot of run and gun, lots of crazy gadgets, lots of really machismo over-the-top lines, lots of machismo over-the-top deaths. And I will just say the last thing, spoiler-free, I liked this game. I thought it was a lot of fun. And if you are a fan of military shooters, if you are a fan of Call of Duty, I don't think you can go wrong playing this game. With that, I'm going to jump over some spoiler stuff. So if you haven't yet played the game, hit save for later, and I'll see you guys a little bit later. For everybody else, let's talk a little bit about some other deeper story tones that I really liked. And it's odd for me to even think that Call of Duty has a story that's worth talking about, because honestly, a lot of these Call of Duty games are just very bizarre. Now, there's always going to be a gut punch moment in every Call of Duty game. I think that's pretty typical for the franchise. But boy, oh boy, did Infinite Warfare double down on that. You had a lot of deaths. As a matter of fact, 763 deaths. The entire crew, sans 4 people, one of which was Lieutenant Salter, your right-hand woman throughout the main campaign. Only 4 survived. It was very clear to me as we were even going through these guerrilla tactics, slowly trying to whittle down the evil empire, that it was going to end pretty much in death for most people. And I think the real turning point had to be when you go back to Earth and the evil Kit Harington is there. Evil Admiral Koch, and he just unloads, destroys your admiral, basically destroys Earth Command, and you are left alone. And they had a lot of really gruesome death scenes in here that you, the player, had to live through, which was really intense. The first one, I think, is obviously watching your ship, the Retribution, get shot out of the sky and crash land. You know at that point there's not going to be a lot of people left. But pretty much the last 2 missions were very depressing, and I think did a serviceable job for the horrors of war. Maybe a little bit on the nose, but man, oh man, you had the Marine Omar. I was sad. Staff Sergeant Omar sacrifices himself running out trying to save another Marine who gets caught in the level with the sun and basically gets burned in front of your very eyes. Pretty intense. Later on, after the Retribution crashes and you lift up a panel, there's another Marine laying there. He's got a piece of metal sticking out of his chest. You have to hold down the left and right triggers, and if you have an elite controller like I do, the thing is vibrating. You can feel his pulse slowly whittling away to nothing. That was intense. I cannot recall any other game where a character dies in your hands, so to speak, and they've done it in such a dramatic fashion. And a lot of these characters are, I don't want to say throwaways, they just have a couple little lines here. Clearly you're all working together, you're on the ship, you get to kind of know them as you're walking through the ship and exploring and going off on a mission, talking with the air boss, talking with the staff sergeant, talking with Ethan the robot, talking with, all these different characters, Gator, the navigator. So in a sense, you kind of get to know them, but they're very one-dimensional, and that's typical for Call of Duty games. I mean, I wouldn't expect a long exposition on this game, and the reality is, I don't think a lot of players want that. So you get to know a little bit about each of them, but as you slowly see every single one of them die, boy, is that a real kick in the gut. Having to hold down the triggers, as I mentioned, watching, feeling the controller vibrate slowly away to nothing. That's pretty intense. Having to, watch, the air boss get shot down, or watching Mac, as you put the charge inside the torpedo tube to begin to detonate the orbital station, and basically sending her off, watching her lock herself in a small chamber with a robot that's, fighting her, and watching her explode. Watching Gator open the door, say, hey, it's really nice to, finally be on a mission with you, and in slow motion get completely lit up. Having to hack Ethan and self-destructing poor Ethan to you know, actually begin the chain reaction that destroyed everything. And then ultimately, Nick raised himself, floating in the breaches of outer space, cold and alone and dying. Very, very rough tone, but I gotta say I liked it. And I think that maybe it was a little heavy-handed at the end, but it did really convey a sense of desperation from the Earth, you know, from the Earth army, and I liked that. Really, these Call of Duty games and a lot of war games in general, I think, have this notion that you're going to be the one-man army. You're going to march in there. You're going to obliterate every enemy. You're going to get away unscathed. You and your crew of a couple members are going to do the impossible, right? You're going to save the day. You're going to destroy all the baddies. Everyone's going to go home. But Infinite Warfare changes all of that. Infinite Warfare puts you in the shoes of a guy in a losing situation. And while there is a little bit of exposition on, you know, the mission and everything versus, you know, is it better to get people home safe, or are we here to complete the mission? Does this look like what winning is? You know, everybody's still alive. You know, we need to throw everything we can at that. But it really did a good job of setting up a global scale conflict and really making you feel like you were the underdog, despite the fact that you were doing all these guerrilla missions throughout the main campaign and the side story, slowly trying to chip back at the enemy. But it was really clear towards the end that you were severely underpowered and severely weakened, and that pretty much it was going to be a suicide mission from the beginning. And it turned out to be a suicide mission, except for those 4 people. Ultimately, at the end, I think it did leave me with kind of, you know, a heavy heart. And I gotta say, a Call of Duty game that made me feel anything other than just kind of glee of just mowing down nameless baddies was really refreshing. And I do have Call of Duty World War II, and I'm really excited to jump into it because I'm wondering if the momentum from these stories carries forward. And I have to say that Infinite Warfare and the guys at Infinity Ward did a really good job of conveying emotion. Lastly, I wanted to say I was a little, it was interesting the way it ended when you have Salt looking at the wall of heroes, you know, and she, you know, says farewell to the captain who's on the wall now. He's gone, as most of the other Retribution members are. And you get to watch basically there during the credits, you can watch, you know, the kind of final, you know, self-eulogies almost, the last living will of most of the major characters saying goodbye to their friends and their family. Even Ethan saying, you know, Captain, when you called me your brother, it was a very emotional thing for me, even though I'm a robot. Or, you know, you had Gator saying goodbye to his wife and his kids. And it was like, man, like, you are really tugging at our heartstrings here, really trying to, you know, hammer home the point that, you know, these characters, which were mostly just kind of prop pieces and story elements, did have families that they wanted to go back home to. And I think that Call of Duty really took a major step forward with this game. And I think they did a great job of making war mean something outside of just a nameless, mindless corridor shooter. So I highly recommend Infinite Warfare. I think it was a really, really fun game. You know, it's got that typical Call of Duty over-the-top machismo, as I mentioned, but it also has great gameplay, great guns, lots of collectibles, unlockables, the space combat. Some of the missions were stealth missions. Some of the cool gadgets you get to use, like hacking enemy robots or setting off the spider mines that jump on people's backs and explode. Very, very fun. But then you inject in this actual story into it, and it's like, wow. So hats off to you guys at Infinite Warfare. I think this was a really good title. So with that, I'm going to close out this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, I will see you guys on the other side.